On April 20, 2022, Sergeant Darius Inzar of the Bibb County Sheriff's Office responded to a call regarding a civil dispute. The resulting body-worn camera footage documents a standard arrest that immediately veers into a procedural anomaly. The suspect, Stephen Faircloth, offers total physical compliance. He does not stiffen his arms, pull away, or attempt to move. He simply places his hands behind his back and tells the officer, "Look, I'm not trying to resist." Yet, the moment the cuffs are secured, the interaction shifts. Faircloth begins crying out in immediate, visible physical distress. Over the next 3 minutes, this isn't a fleeting complaint. Faircloth explicitly notifies Sergeant Inzar that the restraints are causing him pain more than a dozen times, specifically begging the officer to stop the wrist thing. Standard police protocol for handcuffing is designed to prevent exactly this kind of injury. Officers are trained to perform a finger width fit test and engage a double locking mechanism, which stops the metal from ratcheting tighter against the nerves and bone. Sergeant Inzar's recorded response to these complaints is a direct refusal to check the fit. Instead, he dismisses the distress entirely, stating, "It ain't supposed to feel good." The decision to bypass safety protocols while being verbally notified of a suspect's pain suggests this wasn't an oversight. It was a choice to allow the suffering to continue, a choice that requires an investigation into the officer's underlying motive. To see what the officer was actually doing, we have to look at the lateral perspective captured by Officer Taylor's body camera. This reveals the mechanics of a rear wrist lock. Gripping the chain and applying upward leverage forces the wrists and shoulders into unnatural hyperextension. Sustaining the torque forces a steep forward lean. He cannot walk normally, shuffling his feet to keep balance under the mechanical stress. In law enforcement training, this hold is categorized as a pain compliance technique. It is a tool specifically reserved for subduing individuals who are actively resisting or fighting against an officer. Because Faircloth remained passive throughout the entire contact, applying a pain compliance hold demonstrates that the physical suffering was being actively and unnecessarily manufactured. A clue to why this technique was used on a compliant subject appears once Faircloth is secured in the patrol car, and Inzar returns to speak with his partner. Inzar asks his partner, "You know who this is, don't you? It's the guy who them kids stole his car 2 weeks ago." Police records show that Inzar had spent the previous 2 weeks dealing with Faircloth. On April 7th, Inzar was the responding officer when Faircloth's stolen and wrecked Honda Accord was recovered. 5 days later, on April 12th, they crossed paths again. Inzar was dispatched to a suspicious vehicle call at Faircloth's place of business, an incident Faircloth described as a civil parking dispute involving his landlord. The April 20th arrest was the 3rd time Sergeant Inzar had been dispatched to handle Faircloth in a 14-day window. This prior history provides the context for the encounter, suggesting the officer's use of force was informed by a pre-existing familiarity with the suspect. Sergeant Inzar had subjective knowledge of the pain he was inflicting. He heard the cries, he acknowledged them verbally, and he chose to continue the manipulation of the cuffs regardless. The physical evidence left behind confirms the severity of that choice. Because the cuffs were never double-locked, the metal teeth continued to tighten, leaving deep abrasions and indentations in the skin that were still visible a week later. This sequence illustrates a systemic danger. When an officer allows personal history to dictate the level of force used on a compliant citizen, the procedural safeguards intended to protect constitutional rights are effectively neutralized. Under forensic analysis, body-worn cameras document the physical mechanics of an arrest, alongside the officer's verbal reactions. The footage captures the psychological intent behind the force, providing evidence that contradicts the claim of a standard procedure.